All stories are dramatized recreations. Named locations are fictionalized. Any resemblance to real persons is coincidental.
Hi, I'm Sophia, a 33-year-old veterinarian from Nye. Sharing this is hard, but I need to process how my husband David's affair with a colleague shattered our 11-year marriage. It began when I found texts lighting up his phone at midnight, emojis I hadn't sent. I'd just finished stitching up a stray cat's paw at the clinic, my scrubs still smeared with iodine. That little glowing rectangle on our granite countertop felt like a surgical blade slicing through our Brooklyn loft's false serenity. Rain streaked the windows overlooking the Manhattan Bridge, each droplet mirroring how my certainty about us dissolved. David didn't even flinch when I confronted him. Just shrugged, like discussing expired milk. 11 years of shared coffee mugs and mortgage payments evaporated in that shrug. Now the ring on my finger weighs like a shackle. But animals still need mending. So I show up. Because broken things trust me to fix them even when I'm shattered too. The rain hadn't stopped. It tapped against the clinic's windows like fingers begging to be let in. I'd been up since 4 a.m. A Doberman hit by a delivery truck. His owner sobbed in the waiting room while I reset fractured ribs, my hands steady even as my mind replayed David's shrug. Just a colleague. It didn't mean anything. As if 11 years of my life could be dismissed like a wrong number. The dog's whimpers anchored me pain I could actually fix. I whispered to him, suturing muscle with silk thread, pretending the tremor in my voice was fatigue. Back home, David had already moved his things to the guest room. His razor gone from our bathroom sink. That small absence hurt more than the texts. He'd left my favorite mug on the counter, steam curling from black coffee. A peace offering? Or just habit? I didn't touch it. Instead, I stared at the granite where his phone had glowed last night. The ghost of those heart emojis haunted the stone. At noon, Mrs. Chen brought in her ancient Persian cat, Mochi. She won't eat, she fretted. I palpated Mochi's belly, feeling for tumors. Just like us, girl, rotting from the inside. When I said it might be kidney failure, Mrs. Chen's eyes welled. She's all I have. I squeezed her hand, a reflex. My own hollowed-out marriage echoed in her loneliness. David used to bring me soup when I worked late. Now he texted her, "Can't stop thinking about Friday." By 3 p.m., the sky bruised purple. I walked to Prospect Park, needing air thick with wet earth instead of antiseptic. Joggers blurred past, happy, sweaty, whole. I sat on a bench slick with rain, tracing my wedding band's indent. A sparrow hopped near my shoe, one wing dragging. Broken things always found me. I crumbled a protein bar, watching it peck crumbs. Fierce, fragile, surviving. David called as dusk fell. "We should talk," his voice scraped like gravel. I pictured him leaning against our fridge, the one we'd argued over for weeks, stainless steel versus black. "Compromise," he'd laughed, kissing my neck. "We're good at that. Now? Meet me at home," I said. No anger, just exhaustion that seeped into bone. The loft felt colder. He stood by the window, back turned, a silhouette against bridge lights. "I'll stay with Mark for a while," he offered. Not, "I'm sorry," not, "let's fix this." I nodded, swallowing the acid in my throat. His suitcase waited by the door, zipped tight like a body bag. When he hugged me, a stiff, awkward thing, I smelled her perfume, vanilla and bergamot. My hands stayed at my sides. After he left, I scrubbed the coffee mug. Scrubbed until my knuckles split. Blood bloomed in soapy water, a vivid, honest red. Outside, the city glittered, indifferent. I thought of the Doberman breathing evenly now. Of Mochi purring through her IV drip. Of that sparrow taking flight. Some breaks couldn't be mended. Some only revealed what was already fractured. I unclipped my stethoscope, hanging it on its hook. Still trembling. Still here. The scent of antiseptic usually calmed me, that sharp, clean bite cutting through kennel musk and animal fear. But today it clawed at my sinuses as I sutured the torn pad of a German shepherd, my fingers moving with muscle memory precision, while my mind replayed the click of David's suitcase wheels on marble. Blood welled around the suture needle. I blinked away the memory of crimson swirling in dishwater last night. "Easy, Axel," I murmured, though the tremor in my voice wasn't for him. His owner, a construction worker with concrete dust ground into his knuckles, hovered near the door. He chased a squirrel onto glass shards behind the old brewery, he offered, apologetic. We all chase things that cut us, I thought, tying off the final stitch. At lunch, I hid in the supply closet, dark, cramped, smelling of folded cotton and fear pheromones from unused exam towels. My phone glowed. We need to discuss the apartment. Call me, David's text. Rain lashed the clinic's back window as I pressed my forehead against cold metal shelves. 11 years dissolved into logistics. Who kept the Le Creuset pans we'd bought in Paris, the velvet sofa that still held dents from our movie nights. Outside, a delivery van screeched. Brakes hissed like betrayal. I bit into a cold egg sandwich, yolk congealed and sulphurous on my tongue. Mrs. Rivera arrived at 3 p.m. with her parrot, Paco, feathers plucked raw. He screams when I leave the room, she said, dark circles bruising her eyes. As I examined the bird's inflamed skin, she twisted her wedding ring, a nervous orbit around her finger. My husband travels for work. Paco started this after his last trip to Miami. Her voice frayed at the edges. I smoothed antibiotic ointment onto Paco's skin. The bird's heart beat frantic against my palm. We're all creatures of absence, I almost said. Instead, try leaving the radio on. Soft music, she nodded, but her eyes said she knew the silence that yawned when trust evaporated. Driving home, I took the FDR drive, slow, grinding traffic mirroring the inertia in my chest. Rain blurred taillights into bloody streaks. David's vanilla bergamot perfume still haunted my car vents. At a red light, I spotted a couple arguing in the next car, her hands slashing air, his jaw clenched tight. She threw a paper cup, coffee splashed the windshield like a Rorschach blot. We never fought like that, I realized. David's indifference had been quieter, a glacial retreat I mistook for calm. The loft echoed when I entered. No note. Just David's forgotten gym bag slumped by the door, a worn Nike logo, sweat stains darkening the strap. Inside, damp socks, protein bar wrappers, and a crumpled receipt from the Harborview Inn dated 2 weeks ago. Coastal Inn, room 312. 2-night minimum. My breath hitched. The weekend he'd claimed a team-building retreat. I traced the smudged ink, paper rough as unhealed scar tissue. Downstairs, a siren wailed. Its Doppler scream echoed the vertigo tilting my world. I poured Merlot bitter oak barrel tannins and stood at our window. Manhattan's skyline glittered, cold and remote as a circuit board. He kissed her here, I thought, fingernails digging into my palm, while I sutured a Dalmatian's paw at 11 p.m. Outside, neon signs bled color onto wet asphalt, diner, pharmacy, loans. Life reduced to necessities. My reflection ghosted the glass. A woman hollowed out, clutching stemware like an anchor. When the phone rang, I knew. Sophia. David's voice, stripped of warmth, all and ass as, entation, the warmer of course jest. Mark says I can stay another month. We should. Sign papers. Yes. Silence pooled between us, thick as clotting blood. I'll email the lawyer. A pause. Are you? Fine. The lie scraped my throat raw. I hung up, wine sloshing onto the counter, a spreading stain like old violence. Later, I found Paco's file on my desk. Mrs. Rivera had scribbled in the margins, "Thank you for listening." Outside, rain softened to mist. I touched the receipt still in my pocket, edges sharp as betrayal, tore it slowly. Rip, rip, rip. Let the pieces fall into the trash like dead leaves. For the first time in weeks, I slept without dreaming. Morning light sliced through the blinds, razor-thin lines striping the hardwood where David's dresser once stood. I'd dragged it to the curb at dawn, its empty drawers yawning like broken promises. Sawdust clung to my sweat-damp neck as I scrubbed the ghost rectangle it left on the floorboards, the scent of pine cleaner sharp enough to make my eyes water. Outside, garbage trucks groaned through the cross streets, a dissonant symphony of compactor hydraulics and shattering glass. My phone buzzed, lawyer sent papers, review by Friday. David's text, stripped of punctuation, clinical as a biopsy report. I wiped my hands on jeans still speckled with Axel's blood from yesterday, the fabric stiffening like a second skin. At the clinic, Mrs. Gupta waited, her greyhound trembling in a sling, ribs protruding like bent coat hangers. "Found her near the docks," she whispered, stroking the dog's velvet ears. The exam room felt airless, the stench of infected wounds and rotting teeth pooled thick as fog. As I palpated the distended abdomen, the greyhound's whimper merged with the hum of the X-ray machine down the hall, a high, thin wire of sound tightening around my sternum. The image flickered on the screen, inoperable tumors, dark constellations devouring the liver. "I can make her comfortable," I said, watching Mrs. Gupta's knuckles whiten around the sling straps. Comfortable. A euphemism as hollow as David's, it didn't mean anything. Rain returned at noon, drumming the clinic's tin roof as I prepped the euthanasia solution. Syringe cool in my palm liquid, heavier than grief. Mrs. Gupta sobbed into the greyhound's neck, murmuring Hindi lullabies while I shaved a patch of paper-thin skin. The needle slid in, the dog sighed, a long release like steam from a kettle. Her body went slack, eyes milky as river stones. At least one of us escapes today, I thought, peeling off my gloves. Mrs. Gupta pressed a jasmine blossom into my hand, petals bruised, scent cloyingly sweet, before stumbling into the downpour. I retreated to the pharmacy alcove, its shelves stacked with amber bottles and coiled IV lines. David called as I counted tramadol tablets. "Did you get the email?" Rain lashed the window behind him. He was standing on Mark's balcony, Brooklyn Bridge, a gray smear in the distance. My reflection glowed in the computer monitor, split screen between divorce documents and Paco's blood work. Section 4B, he added. The retirement accounts. The tablet counter clicked beneath my fingernails. 1, 2, 3, as his voice dissolved into static. "Remember Costa Rica? Pura vida," he laughed when we opened those IRAs, sand still gritty between our toes. Now his tone carried the flat cadence of a GPS command. Traffic snarled on Flatbush Avenue, honking horns, sirens, the wet shush of tires through standing water. I walked instead of driving, collar turned up against the chill. Outside a bodega, a florist huddled under an awning, roses weeping crimson petals into storm drains. The scent overripe, funeral heavy clogged my throat. Her perfume was bergamot, I realized. Sharp, citric. Nothing like these decaying blooms. Home. The loft echoed with new absences, no gym bag, no forgotten watch. Just a single coffee cup in the sink mine. I reheated leftover congee, the ginger and scallion aroma failing to mask the lingering vanilla on the couch cushions. As I ate, my laptop glowed, divorce settlement agreement.pdf. Page 7, Section 4B, 401k assets divided per Qdro. Rain blurred the streetlights into halos below. I closed the document, opened Mrs. Gupta's file. Name, Layla, age, 9 years. Cause of death, metastatic carcinoma. Attached, a scanned drawing of a stick figure vet beside a rainbow. Midnight. The city's pulse thrummed through the walls. Helicopters, distant bass, a car alarm wailing like a wounded cat. I stood before the bathroom mirror, David's razor in my hand. Not to shave. To scrape his label off my prescription bottles, Sophia Chen Williams. The blade bit into plastic, flecking the sink with translucent shavings. Chen, just Chen, each isk sounded like liberation. When the last Williams fell away, I ran the tap, watched the fragments swirl down the drain like ash. Sleep didn't come. I traced the jasmine blossom's brown edges, now pressed between veterinary journals. Outside, thunder rolled over the East River. For the first time, the silence felt like mine. Rainwater dripped from the clinic's awning, a steady plink-plink into overflowing buckets, as I peeled off bloodied gloves after a complicated pyometra surgery. The Pomeranian's owner wept with relief in the waiting room. I felt only the dull throb behind my temples where David's lawyer's email still pulsed. Qdro processing initiated. My phone buzzed again. Not David this time, but an unknown number, Dr. Chen. Animal control found a red-tailed hawk with a compound fracture near Gowanus. No one else will take a raptor after hours. The address flashed. A condemned warehouse rooftop. Grit, I told myself, grabbing the trauma kit. Just grit. The warehouse elevator reeked of urine and wet rust, cables groaning like dying things as it shuddered upward. Wind howled through shattered windows on the 12th floor, carrying the brackish stench of the canal below. The hawk lay crumpled near a graffiti-strewn water tower, one wing bent at a sickening angle, chest heaving in panicked bursts. Rain plastered its russet feathers into dark spikes. "Easy, warrior," I murmured, approaching sideways to avoid its razor-sharp gaze. Leather gloves saved my hands as it struck, talons scraping, beak snapping, before exhaustion won. I wrapped it in a thermal blanket, feeling the frantic drum of its heart against my palms. Fear and fury, I thought. "I know you." Back at the clinic, under the surgical lamp's sterile glare, the fracture was worse than expected, ulna shattered, bone fragments glittering like ivory shrapnel in the light. As I flushed debris with saline, the door chimed. A man stood silhouetted against the storm animal control officer, his badge glinting under fluorescence. "Need an extra pair of hands?" His voice was calm gravel, steadying as he gloved up without waiting for permission. Detective Mark Russo, his id clipped to a rain-slicked jacket. His movements were precise, applying pressure, handing tools before I asked, while the hawk's breaths rasped through the oxygen mask. "Found him tangled in construction netting," he said, swabbing blood from the bird's breast, fighting like hell to free himself. I pinned the bone with delicate K-wires, Mark's steadying fingers brushing mine. He smelled of wet wool and gun oil, nothing like David's vanilla poison. Suturing the skin, I noticed Mark's wedding band, a worn silver circle, and the pale line where it once sat. "Ex-wife kept hers too," he said quietly, catching my glance at my own bare finger. "Said it was evidence of poor life choices." A grim chuckle. Rain lashed the windows as we transferred the hawk to recovery, its eyes half-lidded with morphine. "He'll fly again?" Mark asked, stripping off gloves. "Maybe, if the bone grafts take." I wiped sweat from my brow with a trembling wrist. "If anything takes root in this wreckage." He stayed while I filed notes, silent stretching, but not the hollow kind David left. This was weighted with shared exhaustion. "Coffee," Mark finally offered, nodding toward the all-night diner across the street. Its neon sign bled pink onto wet asphalt. "Eat." Inside, vinyl booths cracked like dried earth, the air thick with grease and burnt coffee. We slid into a corner booth. He ordered black. I chose chamomile, my stomach still knotted from the hawk's blood and David's paperwork. "My wife died," Mark said abruptly, tracing a chip in the formica. "Ovarian cancer, 2 years ago." The confession hung between us, raw as an open wound. The ring, it's not evidence. It's ballast. Outside, sirens wailed toward the river. I thought of the hawk's shattered wing, the fragile scaffolding holding it together. Ballast. Something to keep you from capsizing. He walked me back to the clinic at dawn. Rain had softened to mist, the city washed clean and ghostly. At the door, he hesitated. "The hawk, you'll call if, I'll call." A nod. Then he was gone, taillights dissolving into gray. Inside, the hawk watched me from its crate proud, wounded, unbroken. I placed my hand against the wire. Its heartbeat thrummed against my palm, fierce and alive. In the staff bathroom, I splashed cold water on my face. The mirror showed dark smudges under my eyes, but my shoulders were straighter. David's latest text glowed on the sink, signatures needed by Monday. I deleted it. As sunlight fractured through clouds, I pressed my bare ring finger to the glass. The ghost indent had faded. Only skin remained, pale, unmarked, mine. The hawk's recovery cage hummed with the low thrum of a heat lamp, a mechanical heartbeat in the clinic's pre-dawn stillness. I watched its chest rise and fall, pin feathers regrowing like charred grass after a wildfire. My own exhaustion felt different today, not the hollowed-out ache of David's departure, but the bone-deep fatigue of rebuilding. Mark's card lay beside the cage, ink smudged from rain, debt. Mark Russo, Animal Cruelty Task Force. I traced the embossed shield, the paper coarse as tree bark. Outside, garbage trucks roared down Atlantic Avenue, their compactor jaws gnashing through last night's rain-sodden debris. Divorce papers arrived at 8 a.m., thick FedEx envelope propped against the clinic door. I carried it inside like contaminated waste, setting it beside a stack of vaccine invoices. Sophia Chen Williams versus David Williams. The legal weight of that hyphen, once a bridge, now a barricade. Mrs. Alvarez bustled in with her diabetic poodle, Sugar, whose breath smelled of acetone and decay. "Her sugars are wild again," she fretted, handing me the glucose log. Numbers spiked and plummeted like my own cortisol levels. As I drew insulin, Sugar licked my wrist, a sandpaper tongue of trust. The syringe's plunger resisted. I thought of David's signature waiting on page 17, final and irrevocable. Mark called while I was elbow-deep in a dumpster-diving raccoon's abscess. "Hawks perching," he announced, background noise of squawking radios and city traffic. "Wanted you to hear." Through the phone, a raw cree sliced the static defiant, untamed. My scalpel slipped, nicking the raccoon's skin. Blood bloomed bright against pus yellow. "He's cursing his caste," I laughed, the sound unfamiliar in my own ears. Mark's chuckle vibrated down the line. "Sounds like my ex-partner after donuts." A pause. "You free tonight?" That diner's pie could heal anything. The raccoon whimpered as I sutured. "Yes," I almost said. Instead, rain check. Literally. By 5 p.m., the sky bruised purple again. I drove to the Gowanus Canal, the Hawks release site. Mark stood under the skeletal remains of a construction crane, its shadow long and jagged across cracked concrete. The Hawk rode his leather-gloved fist, bandages gone, eyes sharp as shattered obsidian. "Ready?" Mark's voice softened. I nodded, stepping closer. Wind snatched at my hair, carrying the canal's reek of salt and rust. He lifted his arm, the Hawk tensed, muscles coiling like springs. Then push. Wings snapped open, catching an updraft with a sound like tearing canvas. We watched it rise, circling higher until it became a black speck against thunderheads. "He's free," Mark murmured. "Or just lost," I said, the words escaping before I could cage them. He turned, his gaze steady. "Same thing sometimes." Rain began as we walked back to our cars. Fat, cold drops that hissed on sun-baked asphalt. At my Prius, he stopped. Almost forgot. From his patrol car's front seat, he pulled a dented thermos. "Coffee, black, in case you change your mind about pie." The metal warmed my palms through thin scrubs. His knuckles brushed mine. Rough, scarred, real. When he drove away, I sat gripping the steering wheel, thermos between my thighs. David's divorce papers lay on the passenger seat. I flipped to page 17. Signature of petitioner. The dotted line gaped like an unstitched wound. Traffic crawled over the Manhattan Bridge. Below, East River currents churned brown and white-capped. I cracked the thermos lid, steam unfurled, rich and smoky, nothing like David's overpriced artisan blends. At the crest of the bridge, brake lights flared crimson. I pulled over, hazards blinking. Rain hammered the roof as I scrawled my name. Sophia Chen, looping the sea like a hawk's flight path. No hyphen, no anchor. The pen bled blue ink onto cheap paper. Back at the loft, I placed the thermos on the counter, a sentinel beside David's abandoned French press. The silence here was different now, not absence, but space. I opened windows, letting in the wet night smells of diesel and wet pavement. Mrs. Alvarez called as thunder rattled the skyline. "Sugar's sugar is perfect. How do I thank you?" Her gratitude was a live wire in the dark. Outside, lightning forked over Brooklyn. I watched it fracture the clouds, illuminating, for a second, the 1,000 broken things still waiting to be mended. The Hawk cried again in my memory, that fierce, untamed scream. I lifted the thermos in a silent toast to the storm, to the wildness, to the unknown road ahead. Rain drummed the clinic roof like impatient fingers as I scrubbed kennel floors, pine-scented disinfectant failing to mask the underlying tang of fear and urine. Mark's thermos stood sentinel on the counter, its brushed steel gleaming under fluorescent lights. I hadn't touched it. Not yet. David's signature arrived via email at noon, a scanned JPEG of his loopy cursive beneath mine on page 17, Sophia Chen. David Williams. 2 names severed by a dotted line. Or... Sugar's glucose log lay beside it, her numbers finally steady. Control is possible, I told myself, elbow deep in soapy water. Mark arrived unannounced at 3 p.m., rain dripping from his patrol jacket's epaulets. "Follow up on the construction netting case," he said, holding up an evidence bag filled with frayed orange plastic. But his eyes lingered on the thermos. The Hawk's empty recovery cage sat behind him, wires still warm. Heard back from wildlife rehab. Your patient's terrorizing pigeons upstate. A grin softened the fatigue in his face. I offered coffee French press, not thermos, my hands trembling as I poured. Dark liquid splashed the saucer. Divorce finalized? He asked, taking the mug. His wedding band's ghost line seemed paler today. Signed, not finalized. The words tasted like ash. 6 months of cooling off period. New York law. He nodded, knuckles whitening around the ceramic. Jenny's cooling off period was 3 years of chemo. Silence pooled between us, thick with shared understanding. Outside, a delivery van backfired. A gunshot crack making us both flinch. At closing, Mrs. Alvarez returned, sugar wobbling in a new sequined sweater. For you, she pressed a Tupperware into my hands. Arroz con leche. Cinnamon and condensed milk wafted through the lid. Sugar's miracle worker, she declared. As they left, Mark touched the container. Smells like my abuela's kitchen. His thumb brushed mine, a fleeting warmth that lingered like brandy heat. Driving home, I took the Brooklyn Queens Expressway. Taillights smeared red across wet asphalt, wipers thumping a dirge. David called mid-bridge, his voice tinny through Bluetooth. Soph, the lawyer says. Dr. C. Doctor? Chen. East River Wines buffeted the car. A pause. Right, the Qdro paperwork needs, email it. Rain blurred the city into watercolor grays. Don't call again. The line died. I cranked Radiohead's No Surprises, Tom York's falsetto drowning the silence. The loft smelled of fresh paint. I'd rolled over David's office wall at dawn. Tidewater blue, the can promised. Now, drips crusted the baseboards like dried tears. Mark's thermos sat beside the half-empty can. Just coffee, I told myself. But when I unscrewed the cap, steam carried something else, burnt caramel and salt. Navy SEAL blend, the label read. Roasted in San Diego. I took a sip bitter, bracing, alive. I texted him, coffee's not pie. But thanks, his reply came instantly, pie requires sunlight. Forecast says 9 days of rain. Then, coffee's our ballast, I typed back. Midnight found me tearing David's shelving from the wall. Drywall dust snowed onto the hardwood as I levered the last bracket free. Splinters dug into my palm, sharp, clean pain. In the hollow behind the shelves, something glinted, a silver cufflink shaped like a chess knight. His anniversary gift from her. I'd wondered where he'd lost it. Now I knew, tossed here like contraband. Rain blurred the fire escape outside. I opened the window, letting icy mist kiss my face. Then I hurled the cufflink into the dark, a tiny silver arc swallowed by the alley below. No splash, just gone. The thermos was half empty when I curled on the repainted room's floor. Dust coated my tongue, but the coffee's warmth spread through my ribs like courage. My phone lit up. Mark, ballast only works if you're moving forward. Diner tomorrow? Outside, thunder growled. I typed yes, then added, bring your own fork. His reply, always do. For the first time since the heart emoji night, I slept without dreaming of falling. Frost etched fractal ferns across the clinic's windows, winter's first bite replacing autumn's endless rain. Mark's thermos sat empty on the radiator, its steel sweating condensation onto divorce papers, Qdro processing complete. The finality should have been a relief. Instead, it felt like stepping onto ice thin, treacherous, holding only the illusion of solid ground. Sugar's glucose log showed perfect curves now, but Mrs. Alvarez's eyes lingered when she dropped off payment. You look tired, doctora, she murmured, pressing pastelitos into my hand. Guava and cheese steamed through the wax paper sweetness, sharp as a scalpel. Mark's diner invitation hung between us like unset bone. I'd agreed. Now, panic fluttered behind my ribs, a caged sparrow. What if he smells the divorce on me? What if I'm just another wounded thing he patches? Outside, salt trucks ground their teeth against asphalt. I restocked suture kits, counting each needle, 1 for courage, 2 for doubt, 3 for. The raccoon crashed back in at 5 p.m., Mrs. p.m. Kowalski's voice shrill over the phone, he's shaking. Blue lips. She'd ignored my sepsis warnings, fed him deli turkey. Now he lay on stainless steel, hypothermic and gasping, IV lines snaking from his shaved forearm. Compensated shock, I barked to Carlos, the new tech. Warm fluids, stat. My stethoscope caught the ragged stutter beneath his fur, a failing engine. Hold on, I willed him, fingers compressing the ambu bag. Just hold on. Mark found me there hours later, forehead pressed against the cold kennel door, raccoon stable but critical in oxygen therapy. Diner's still open, he said softly, holding 2 paper cups of coffee. No thermos tonight. Just cardboard and pragmatism. His knuckles were scraped raw. Cheese debate dog ring behind the slaughterhouses, he explained, catching my glance. Blood rimmed his nails. We sat on upturned buckets in the supply closet, heat lamps humming. David called, I confessed. Steam curled from my cup. Wanted his vinyl collection. Mark sipped his coffee. Black, no sugar. Tell him to hire movers. He cried. The admission tasted sour. Said he's drowning. A muscle jumped in Mark's jaw. Funny, my ex-wife drowned me in medical debt before skipping to Cabo. He set his cup down. Crying's cheap, Sophia. Real drowning people don't splash. The raccoon whimpered. We rose together, his hand brushing the small of my back as I checked vitals. A jolt. Not electric. Deeper like bone knitting. The diner booth felt different tonight. No rain blurring the neon eat sign, just crystalline cold outside. Mark ordered cherry pie. I didn't protest. His fork slid through the lattice crust, scarlet filling oozing like a vein. Jenny hated pie, he said abruptly. Called it ruined fruit, a grim smile. Last real talk we had was over hospital jello. He pushed the plate toward me. Try it. The sweetness exploded. Tart cherries, cinnamon, butter crust shattering on my tongue. David hated sugar, I remembered. Called it weakness. Outside, a couple argued by a snow-dusted taxi, their breath pluming like speech bubbles. The woman threw her glove. It smacked the windshield. Mark watched them, his eyes weary. Love's messy. Like my crime scenes. He nudged the pie plate closer. Eat the damn fruit, Doc. I did. Every bite. Walking back, snow crunched under our boots. His patrol car idled outside the clinic, exhaust swirling in the street lamp's halo. Ballast update, he said, digging into his coat. Not coffee this time. A Swiss Army knife, scratched and sturdy. Jenny's. Used it to cut her morphine lines when the pain got loud. He pressed it into my palm. The metal held residual warmth. Seemed better with you. Inside, the raccoon breathed easier, oxygen mask fogging with each steady exhale. I placed the knife beside Mark's thermos. 2 talismans now. David's final email glowed on my screen, vinyls shipped. Goodbye, Soph. I deleted it, then opened Sugar's file. Prognosis, managed. Life expectancy, full. At midnight, frost painted galaxies on the window. I traced one with my fingertip. Cold, temporary, beautiful. The uneaten pie slice sat boxed on the counter. Tomorrow, I decided, I'd finish it in the sunlight. January air bit like teeth. Frost feathered the clinic's windows, delicate as lace, blurring the amber glow of streetlights outside. Mark's Swiss Army knife lay open on the counter, the small blade gleaming beside Sugar's latest glucose log. Her numbers held steady. Consistency, I told myself, tightening my grip on the scalpel. Mrs. Kowalski's raccoon needed his abscess drain removed. A simple procedure, but his fever had spiked overnight. The stench of infection soured the air. Mark arrived as I sutured the incision, snow dusting his shoulders like powdered sugar. Animal control seized 12 fighting dogs from a basement in Red Hook, he said, voice tight. His knuckles, scraped raw yesterday, were now split open. Blood crusted the edge of his sleeve. Bastards used tire irons. He dropped an evidence bag on the counter, rusted chains, matted with brindle fur. I finished the suture, my hands steady. Sit, he didn't argue. In the cramped bathroom, I cleaned his knuckles, alcohol stinging the quiet. His breath hitched. A sound I knew too well. You should get stitches, I said, dabbing iodine. Waste of time. His gaze fixed on the wall, a poster of feline dental anatomy. Dogs are worse. 3 might lose eyes. My finger brushed a deep gash, like this needs closure. So do we. The words hung, unexpected. He didn't mean the wound. Outside, snow muted the city's growl. We walked to the diner, chains clanking in his evidence bag. The neon eat sign flickered arrhythmically. Inside, Vinyl groaned as we slid into the booth. He ordered black coffee. I asked for hot chocolate, a rebellion against David's sugarless austerity. The pie arrived apple, this time, lattice crust golden. Mark pushed it toward me. Ballast upgrade. I took a bite. Cinnamon and tart fruit burst on my tongue. Warmth pooling low in my belly. Why the knife? I asked abruptly. Jenny's. He stirred his coffee, spoon clinking ceramic. She used it to cut her wedding band off when the swelling got bad. A pause. Said it felt like shedding dead weight. His eyes met mine. You ever feel like that? Yes. The word lodged in my throat. I touched my bare finger, no indent now, just smooth skin. His phone buzzed. Animal control. Another raid. He stood, dropping cash on the table. Eat the pie, Doc. Alone, I traced the knife's worn handle. Shedding dead weight. Outside, snow swirled under streetlights. I boxed the remaining pie, paid, and stepped into the cold. The loft felt different tonight. Warmer. I placed the pie box beside Mark's thermos. David's vinyl collection was gone. Only faint dust outlines remained on the shelves I'd repainted Tidewater blue. I opened windows, letting icy air rush in. Below, a snowplow grumbled down the street. Mark called at midnight. Dogs are stable. 2 eyeballs saved. Exhaustion frayed his voice. Thanks for the field medicine. Anytime. Silence stretched, comfortable this time. Snow tapped the glass. Jenny's knife, he said suddenly. Use it, not as a relic. As a tool. I clicked open the blade-sharp utilitarian. What should I cut first? Whatever holds you back. I found it in the back of my closet, David's Nayu sweatshirt, threadbare and smelling faintly of his cedar cologne. I hadn't worn it since the heart emoji night. Dead weight. Outside, wind howled around the building's edges. I spread the sweatshirt on the kitchen floor, fabric soft beneath my knees. The knife blade caught the light as I sliced through faded purple cotton. Shoulder seam first, then sleeves. Methodical, surgical. Fabric surrendered like rotten sutures. When it lay in pieces, a dismantled ghost, I bundled the shreds into a trash bag. The blade felt warm in my palm. Alive. At 2 a.m., the raccoon relapsed. Mrs. Kowalski sobbed over the phone. He's cold, so cold. I drove through deserted streets, snow hissing under tires. The clinic's heat lamps glowed like miniature suns. The raccoon lay limp, oxygen mask fogging weakly. Sepsis. I prepped IV antibiotics, hands steady. Hold on, I whispered, not just to him. Mark found me there at dawn, slumped beside the oxygen cage. He carried 2 steaming paper cups. Heard the call on the scanner. I nodded toward the raccoon breathing steadier now, paws twitching in sleep. Pulled through. Like his doctor. He handed me hot chocolate. No pie. Emergency rations. We sat on the floor, backs against cold cabinets. Snowlight filtered through blinds, striping the linoleum. He pulled Jenny's knife from his pocket, opened the tiny scissors, snipped a loose thread from his sleeve. See? Useful. I sipped the chocolate, too sweet, perfect. What's next for the fighting dogs? Rehab. Foster homes. He bumped my shoulder gently. Like us. Outside, a snowplow scraped asphalt, the sound of the world making space. February's freeze locked the city in glass salt-stained sidewalks glittering under streetlights like shattered constellations. The raccoon's cage sat empty, finally discharged to Mrs. Kowalski's heated garage. A new patient took his place, a shivering chihuahua abandoned in a cardboard box outside the clinic, frost crystallizing his whiskers. Tito, I named him, wrapping him in thermal blankets while eye fluids warmed his veins. Mark's thermos steamed beside Sugar's file staple stamped across her latest log, but the Swiss Army knife felt heavier today. Jenny's blade. Jenny's ghost. Mark arrived mid-morning, snow melting in his hair. He carried a dented metal toolbox. For Tito's owner, he said, setting it down. Found it at the bait dog warehouse. Inside, dog toys, flea meds, a chewed leather collar. No owner, just supplies. His eyes lingered on the knife beside Tito's cage. Using it? I'd sawed through David's remaining ties yesterday, gym membership cards, library hold slips, even dry cleaning tags bearing Chen Williams. The shreds filled a trash bag now. Cutting dead weight, I said. Tito whimpered, burrowing deeper into blankets. Good. Mark's hand covered mine on the knife-brief, calloused warmth. Now cut something alive. The pier stretched into the East River like a rotten tooth. Wooden planks slick with ice, industrial carcasses rusting in the harbor wind. Mark's surprise required steel-toed boots and hard hats borrowed from Port Authority. Illegal exotic breeder, he shouted over gulls. Got tipped last night. Inside a corroded shipping container, heat lamps glowed like artificial suns. Cages lined the walls, sugar gliders trembling in huddles, a parrot plucking its own chest bloody and in the corner. Fennec fox, I breathed. Enormous ears swiveled toward us, eyes black and terrified. Emaciated, one paw swollen with infection. Stress-induced self-mutilation, I diagnosed, gloving up. The fox shrank back, a low growl vibrating its ribs. Mark crouched, offering a piece of jerky. Easy, little warrior. Back at the clinic, surgery took hours. Abscess drainage, antibiotic flush, IV hydration. Mark handed instruments silently, forceps, gauze, suture thread, his presence steady as a heartbeat. When I shaved the infected paw, the fox's bones felt delicate as bird wings. She'll need a sanctuary, I murmured, stitching. Already called one in Vermont. Mark wiped pus from the surgical drape. They'll take the others too. As dusk bled into night, we sat on the clinic floor, Fox sedated in oxygen, Tito sleeping against my thigh. Mark opened the toolbox, pulling out a dented tin of dog treats. Found this buried under cages. Inside, instead of biscuits, a wedding photo. Jenny, vibrant in her hospital bed, laughing as Mark fed her ice chips. Her bald head gleamed under fluorescent lights, his ringed hand clasping hers. My evidence of poor choices, he joked, but his thumb traced Jenny's smile. Or proof you loved well, I said softly. He slid the photo to me. Keep it. Ballast needs sharing. The loft smelled of snow and antiseptic. I placed Jenny's photo beside the Swiss Army knife. 2 talismans of survival. David's last email glowed on my laptop, 401k disbursement processed. No soft, no goodbye, just numbers. Outside, a snowplow scraped asphalt with metallic fury. I opened Jenny's knife. Not the blade, the scissors. Tito slept in a nest of blankets, his breathing even. From my closet, I pulled the velvet box holding my wedding dress. Unworn since the ceremony 11 years ago. David had insisted on preserving it for our daughter, he'd said, though we never tried. The scissors slid through lace-like water. Snip sleeves, gone. Snip train, severed. Snip bodice reshaped into a sleeveless shell. Fabric pooled like shed skin on the floor. When the dress lay reinvented, a cocktail-length slip of ivory, I held it to the light. No longer a relic, a possibility. Mark texted at midnight, Fox stable. Sanctuary en route at dawn. Good, I typed back. Then, come see something. He arrived smelling of snow and diesel, eyebrows raised at the transformed dress hanging in the window. Vermont's got a gala fundraiser next month, he said, running a finger along the new hem. Could use a vet speaker. And a detective escort? His smile crinkled the corners of his eyes. Only if you wear that. We drank coffee black from the thermos watching Snowcloak Brooklyn. Tito snored in his blanket fort. Jenny would have liked you, Mark said abruptly. We hated quitters. The admission warmed me more than the coffee. Outside, the wind howled, not a dirge now, but a wild song. I picked up the scissors again. Your turn. He hesitated, then pulled a keychain from his pocket, a pewter seal trident. Jenny called it my emotional flak jacket. The scissors' jaws closed over the chain. Snip. Metal clinked on the counter, freed. Better? I asked. He pocketed the bare trident. Lighter. Snow blurred the streetlights into halos. For the first time, the future felt less like thin ice and more like open sky. March winds rattled the clinic's windows. No longer winter's knife edge, but a raw, wet promise of thaw. Tito perched on the reception desk now, a tiny sentinel in a hand-knitted sweater Mrs. Alvarez made him. The Fennec Fox's recovery photos from Vermont glowed on my phone. Bastet sunning in snow, the sanctuary wrote. Ears finally relaxed. Mark's toolbox sat open beside her file. repurposed for Tito's toys, frayed ropes and a squeaky hedgehog. The gala invitation arrived embossed on thick cardstock, Green Mountain Wildlife Rescue Benefit. Mark studied it over my shoulder, coffee steaming in Jenny's thermos. Black tie optional, he read, tracing the gold lettering. His finger brushed my collarbone. Accidental, electric. Lead shoes. I have boots, not for dancing. We spent Saturday at a consignment shop in Park Slope. Dust motes danced in slanting light as I tried on gowns. Mark waited on a velvet fainting couch, flipping through Field and Stream. Verdict? I asked, emerging in a navy sheath. He lowered the magazine. 2. Funeral. David's mother's funeral, I remembered. Midnight silk, his hand crushing mine. I unzipped it hastily. The third dress was emerald green sleeveless, bias-cut silk. My altered wedding lace peeked from the neckline. Ballast upgrade, the shopkeeper winked. Mark stood abruptly, knocking over a hat stand. That's the one. Outside, sleet pinged the awning as he paid. For Vermont, he said, refusing the receipt. Preparations bled into chaos. A blizzard stranded 7 hikers' sled dogs near Bear Mountain, hypothermic, paws shredded by ice. The clinic became a field hospital, IV fluids snaking across floors, heat lamps humming, the tang of blood and antiseptic cutting through wet dog musk. Mark hauled generators when power flickered, his sleeves rolled to reveal faded seal tattoos. Like Fallujah, he joked grimly, cradling a shivering husky. Minimal gunfire. We worked 36 hours straight. At dawn, the last dog, a grizzled Malamute named Thor, lifted his head to lap broth. Mark slumped against kennel bars, eyes bloodshot. Galas tomorrow, I murmured, stitching a paw pad. Reschedule? Sanctuary's auctioning a Lynx release. I nodded at Thor, he'd want us there. Driving north next morning, the Prius groaned under medical donations. Mark slept in the passenger seat. Jenny's toolbox wedged at his feet. Snow thinned to slush as we crossed into Vermont. Pastures emerged, dun-colored, pocked with icy meltwater framed by skeletal maples. Jenny's hometown, Mark said, waking abruptly near Bennington. He pointed to a white church spire. Married there, buried there. The sanctuary nestled in wooded hills, barns converted to recovery paddocks. We unloaded supplies in silence. Inside the fundraiser, fiddle music tangled with champagne flutes. My green silk felt foreign, too soft against skin calloused by sutures. Mark's rented tuxedo strained across his shoulders. You clean up decent, he offered, handing me sparkling cider. A woman approached, silver-bobbed, wearing a volunteer pin. You must be Sophia. Her eyes flicked to Mark. Idea is because used to do. Jenny's Mark. Eleanor, she introduced herself, Jenny's hospice nurse. She made me promise. From her purse, she pulled a folded watercolor, a red-tailed hawk soaring over mountains. For the vet who mends wings, Jenny's script read below. Painted it before the pain got too bad. Mark's knuckles whitened around his glass. She never showed me. He were deployed. Eleanor touched his sleeve. She said wings needed time. The auctioneer called for the Lynx release. Outside, snow crunched under dress shoes as we gathered at the enclosure. Sanctuary staff opened the gate. The Lynx hesitated, golden eyes reflecting flashlight beams, then melted into moonlit forest. Quiet fell. Mark stared at the trees where the Lynx vanished. Jenny's ashes are here, he said. Under that sugar maple. Snowflakes caught in his lashes. She'd hate me for not moving on. Or love you for trying, I said. He turned, cupping my face gloves rough against my jaw. His thumb brushed Jenny's lace at my neckline. Sophia. Applause erupted inside. The moment fractured. We drove to a roadside motel, neon vacancy, buzzing. Room 7 smelled of pine cleaner and mildew. Mark set Jenny's toolbox on the dresser. Evidence storage, he joked weakly. I unpinned my hair, emerald silk pooling at my ankles. Outside, wind howled through mountain passes. He reached for me, not in hunger, in trembling relief. His calloused palms mapped my spine, scarred lips brushing my temple. Tell me to stop, he whispered. I traced his trident tattoo. I'd tell you to stay. Later, moonlight striped the quilt. Mark slept deeply, one arm anchoring me to the present. Jenny's watercolor lay on the nightstand, the hawk soaring over peaks we'd yet to climb. I pressed my ear to Mark's chest. His heartbeat echoed Thor's steady rhythm back in Brooklyn, wounded, mending, alive. Thawing ice dripped from the roof. Plink, 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 like stitches dissolving. Morning bled through motel curtains. Thin, watery light striping the quilt where Mark's arm still curved around my waist. His breathing deepened against my neck, warm and rhythmic. Real. Not a dream. Outside, ice cracked from eaves, snap, snap, snapping like sutures giving way. Jenny's watercolor lay face up on the nightstand, the hawk's wings catching dawn. I slipped from bed. Cold linoleum shocked my bare feet. Mark stirred, eyes fluttering open sleep, soft and momentarily lost. Then recognition, a slow unfurling in his gaze. Sophia. My name sounded different on his tongue, less clinical, more claim. We dressed in silence punctuated by dripping faucets and distant plow growls. His fingers brushed my spine while zipping the emerald dress, calluses catching on silk. Eleanor left this. He handed me a folded note with the watercolor, Jenny's favorite trail, sugar maple loop. She'd want you to see it. Snow squeaked under boots as we walked. Vermont air knifed through wool coats, clean and brutal. The sanctuary's back gate opened to untouched powder, birches bowing under ice-glazed branches. Mark's hand found mine, glove against glove. She scattered the ashes here, he said, stopping before a gnarled maple. Winter had stripped its crown to bone. I expected grief. Instead, quiet settled, the deep, still kind after a blizzard. Mark scooped snow from a hollow in the trunk. Nestled inside, a tiny ceramic fox, paint chipped to raw clay. Jenny left these, markers. His thumb rubbed the figurine's ears. Said death shouldn't erase joy. Yeah. A rustle in underbrush. We froze. Bastet Vermont's fennec fox emerged, ears pivoting like satellite dishes. Healthier now, winter-thick fur gleaming. She sniffed the air, black eyes fixed on us, then vanished into white shadows. Move, Mark whispered. The drive back to Brooklyn hummed with unspoken things. We stopped at a roadside diner, wood stove roaring, maple syrup crystallizing on checkered vinyl. Mark slid Jenny's toolbox across the table. Open it. Inside, beneath dog toys and flea vials, a velvet pouch. 2 silver bands nestled together. One wide and scratched, his, one slender and engraved, hers. Always forward, hers read. I kept them like relics, he admitted, stirring black coffee. Now they're just metal. I touched his ring's inner curve. Jenny's name worn almost smooth. What will you do? He pocketed them. Donate the gold to the sanctuary. Jenny hated waste. Rain replaced snow as we crossed the state line. Manhattan's skyline emerged, a gray fang biting bruised clouds. David called mid-tunnel, Bluetooth crackling. The lawyer needs email, I cut in. Beside me, Mark's jaw tightened. Your signature for the final property transfer. The loft's officially yours. Static swallowed his pause. Congratulations. The tunnel spat us into daylight. Thank you, I said, and meant it. Home. The loft breathed differently now, windows streaked with rain instead of frost, tidewater blue walls holding space, not ghosts. Mark set Jenny's toolbox by the door. Where's Tito, Mrs. Alvarez's weekend sleepover? I kicked off heels, bare feet, on cool hardwood. Alone at last. He pulled me close, rain dampening his collar. No trembling this time, just certainty. His kiss tasted of diner coffee and open roads. We stumbled toward the bedroom, shedding silk and wool and history. Later, rain drummed the fire escape as we lay tangled. He traced the scar on my hip, a childhood bicycle spill. Battle wound, he murmured. I touched the bullet graze above his ribs-ridged skin like fossilized lightning. War wound, match set. His laugh rumbled against me. In the kitchen, we made omelets with Vermont cheddar. Mark burned his, I salvaged it. He fed me a crisp edge. Worse than Jenny's, he confessed. She could incinerate water. We ate at the counter, rain silvering the windows. His phone buzzed. Animal control. A hoarder's apartment. 30 cats. Duty calls, he sighed, pulling on jeans. At the door, he hesitated. The gala, it wasn't just ballast. I know. He kissed my forehead. Good. Alone, I washed dishes. David's final paperwork lay on the counter, deed transfer, Sophia Chen only. I rolled it into a tube, tied it with twine from Jenny's toolbox, and shelved it beside Sugar's glucose logs. Tito returned at dusk, wagging in a new superhero cape. Mrs. Alvarez beamed. He ate all his arroz con leche. I cradled him, small, warm, resilient. Outside, streetlights shimmered on wet pavement. Mark texted, "Cats secured. Need a vet tomorrow." "Bring Tito, bring pie," I typed back. "Deal." Rain softened to mist. I opened every window, letting the city's heartbeat flood in sirens, laughter, distant subway thunder. The future hummed, no longer frozen. Rain returned, not winter's icy needles, but a warm April baptism that slicked Brooklyn's pavement into obsidian mirrors reflecting neon and headlights. Tito snored in his new bed beneath the reception desk, paws twitching as he chased dream squirrels. Mark's toolbox sat open nearby, now holding adoption paperwork instead of evidence bags. Mrs. Alvarez's arroz con leche recipe was taped to the lid. Sugar approved. The call came at noon, a warehouse fire near Red Hook. 6 cats rescued from scorched rafters, fur singed and eyes wild with smoke. "Bring oxygen," Mark's voice crackled through the phone. Background screams of sirens and collapsing timber. I loaded the mobile unit tanks, masks, burn gel Tito, leaping into the passenger seat like a furry co-pilot. The warehouse loomed like a blackened ribcage, fire hoses snaking through ankle-deep soot water. Mark emerged from the haze, face streaked with charcoal, carrying a limp calico wrapped in his turnout coat. "Pulmonary edema," he coughed, handing her over. Her breaths came in wet, shallow hitches, the sound of David's last voicemail gasping through my car speakers months ago. We worked on the ambulance tailgate, rain hissing on hot metal. Tito watched from the Prius, nose pressed to glass. Nebulizer mist haloed the calico's face as I threaded an IV into her singed foreleg. Mark held the bag aloft, his sleeve riding up to reveal fresh burns. "Stupid," he muttered. Reached into smoldering insulation. "Like owner, like vet," I said, daubing silver sulfadiazine on his blistered wrist. His pulse jumped under my fingers. The loft smelled of rain and antiseptic that night. Mark's turnout gear lay in a sooty heap by the door, a fallen soldier. We ate takeout Thai over the calico's crate, now named Ember, her bandaged paws needing air as she dreamed. "Adoption finalizations tomorrow," Mark said, pushing spring rolls toward me. "For Tito." The words landed softly, yet my throat tightened. "Permanence. Mrs. Alvarez will be his godmother." "Godmother?" He raised an eyebrow. "He's a chihuahua, not a mobster. He needs protection. From squirrels." Rain blurred the fire escape outside. Mark pulled Jenny's velvet pouch from his pocket, spilling the wedding bands onto the table. They glinted dully under pendant light, always forward catching the gleam. Sanctuary director called. "Auction proceeds covered Bastet's lifetime care." He pushed Jenny's band toward me. "This paid for a new raptor enclosure." I touched the cool metal. "And yours?" "Kept it." He pocketed his ring again. "Not for grief, for balance." Later, tangled in sheets still smelling of smoke, his fingers traced the scar on my hip, slower now, mapping familiar terrain. Rain drummed a steady rhythm on glass. "The burns," I whispered, touching his blistered wrist. "Why risk it?" His breath warmed my temple. Saw her eyes, same look Jenny had trapped, furious. A pause. Couldn't leave her. Family court waited in a drab Brooklyn high-rise, fluorescent lights buzzing like angry wasps. Mrs. Alvarez arrived in Sunday best lace, Tito tucked in a sling decorated with embroidered bones. The judge, a weary woman with cat eye glasses, stamped the papers without ceremony. Legal guardian, Sophia Chen. Tito licked the ink. We celebrated at the diner. "Cherry pie this time. Ember's safe, Tito's yours, ballast deployed," Mark texted the sanctuary director, snapping a photo of Tito nibbling crust. Mrs. Alvarez wept into her coffee. "He'll need quinceañera pictures." Rain softened to mist as we walked home. Outside the loft, Mark stopped. Almost forgot. From his jacket, he pulled a small box. Inside, a silver key. To my place. No pressure, just access. I fastened it to Jenny's Swiss Army knife keyring, steel and silver jingling together. "Balance," I said. Inside, Ember mewed from her crate. I freed her, letting her explore, nose quivering at Tito's bed, Mark's boots, the tidewater blue walls. She leaped onto the deed transfer tube, purring like a faulty engine. Mark opened windows. City sounds rushed in, car horns, laughter, the distant wail of a new fire. He pulled me to the center of the room, our socked feet silent on hardwood. No music. Just rain and breath and the cat's curious stares. We swayed. A slow, wordless rotation. His palm burned through my shirt, where the scar lay. David emailed, I murmured against his neck. Wants his grandmother's vase. Tell him to hire movers, Mark repeated, his voice vibrating against my cheekbone. Already did. Ember batted at our ankles. Tito yipped, joining the dance. We laughed, a sound that felt like sunlight cracking through clouds. Mark's phone buzzed against my hip. Animal control, he sighed. Duty. I unhooked his key from the knife. Take this, for balance. He kissed me. Deep, lingering, tasting of cherries and promise before vanishing into the rain-slicked night. Alone? I lifted Tito. Welcome home, I whispered. He licked my chin, salt and sweetness and belonging. Outside, Brooklyn glittered like 1,000 scattered sequins. The future no longer hummed. It sang. May unfurled across Brooklyn in wet watercolor washes, cherry blossoms dissolving in rain gutters, neon signs bleeding onto slick pavement. Ember claimed the windowsill as her kingdom, tail flicking at pigeons while Tito guarded the clinic's reception desk in his bone-embroidered sling. Mark's boots appeared beneath my coat rack overnight, oil-stained and sturdy beside my muddy Wellingtons. A constellation of shared life, his SEAL Challenge coin on my bookshelf, Sugar's glucose log tucked in his patrol car's glove box. The emergency pierced Saturday's calm, a distraught cyclist bursting through clinic doors, backpack dripping crimson. Hit and run, he gasped, unzipping it to reveal a limp Ginger Tom. Found him on Atlantic Ave. The cat's hind leg bent at a brutal angle, pelvis crushed. Blood soaked through towel scraps, metallic and urgent. Prep or now, I barked to Carlos. Ember hissed from her crate as we rushed past. Mark arrived mid-intubation, still in gym shorts, coffee steaming in Jenny's thermos. Heard the scanner, he panted, gloving up. No questions, just hands steadying the anesthesia mask. Surgery blurred into a mosaic of fractured bone, pinning the femur, grafting iliac crest fragments, irrigating torn muscle. Mark suctioned blood, his biceps tensing with each pass of the wand. Pelvis is jigsaw, I murmured, sweat stinging my eyes. Like my last relationship, he quipped, adjusting the light. Tension cracked. We worked in sync, his tactical precision meeting my anatomical calculus. 3 hours later, the Tom breathed evenly in recovery, metal pins gleaming beneath shaved skin. Odin, the cyclist named him, weeping into his grimy sleeves. For surviving the fall. Rain whispered against the loft that evening. Mark sautéed garlic while I changed Odin's dressings at the kitchen island. Tito supervised from his bed, nose twitching. Animal control eyed the driver, Mark said, sliding onions into the skillet. Construction foreman texting his mistress. Broke Odin's pelvis and his wife's trust in one swipe. The irony tasted bitter. I taped gauze over Odin's stitches. Karma's a surgeon. He plated pasta carbonara, smoky and rich. We ate cross-legged on the floor, Odin purring between us. Mark's phone buzzed, a realtor listing. 2B Brownstone, Carroll Gardens. Garden. Thought we'd need space, he said casually, for Odin's recovery. For us, hung unspoken. I traced the grain of hardwood where David's shelves once stood. Your lease is up, June. And this place, he nodded at Ember batting a cherry blossom through the window crack, feels like a waiting room. Later, sorting laundry, I found the cufflink. Not David's. A new one, shaped like a tiny stethoscope, tucked in Mark's uniform pocket. The card read, for fixing broken things. Including me. Rain thickened as we walked Tito past brownstones. Wisteria dripped purple tears onto wrought iron fences. Mark stopped before a boarded-up bodega, graffiti screaming across plywood. Endings are illusions. David's moving truck comes tomorrow, I said. The last box, his father's war medals, sat in my hall closet. Mark squeezed my hand. Want backup? Handle my own ghosts. The loft echoed with absence when David arrived. Thinner, wearing a shirt I didn't recognize. He flinched seeing Mark's boots. New security, new life. I handed him the box. Rain lashed the windows, turning the Manhattan Bridge into a charcoal smudge. He lingered, clutching metals. Ooh, look, happy. A nod. Deserved. Awkward silence pooled. He gestured to Odin's crate. Still collecting strays? Still fixing what others break. At the door, he hesitated. I met her husband. Good guy. The confession hung like rotten fruit. Felt like shit. Wind howled through the fire escape. Took you 9 months. Got her late? No. I closed the door. The deadbolt clicked final, resonant. Mark emerged from the bedroom, Tito cradled like a football. Ghost exorcised? Reduced to paperwork. I pressed my forehead to his chest, inhaling gun oil and garlic. Odin limped over, purr rumbling against my ankles. That night, rain softened to mist. We toured the brownstone empty rooms smelling of beeswax and possibility. Moonlight striped the overgrown garden through French doors. Mark's key turned in the lock. Needs work, he warned. I pointed to Ivy throttling a cherry tree. Like that pelvis, he grinned. Lynch accepted. Back home, I opened the cufflink box. Not for display. I pinned it to Tito's sling, a tiny medal for resilience. Mark laughed, snapping a photo. Sent it to the sanctuary. Jenny to prove. We fell asleep to Odin's purring symphony. No dreams of falling. Only roots deep, tangled and growing. June heat pressed against Brooklyn like a branding iron air thick with the scent of hot asphalt and blooming linden trees. The brownstone skeleton surrounded us. Plaster dust snowing from exposed lathe. Crowbars leaning against fireplace bricks where pigeons nested decades ago. Mark swung a sledgehammer into a load-bearing wall, muscles corded under sweat-slicked skin, each thud shaking dust motes into amber light. I scraped lead paint from window trim, surgical mask trapping humid breath. Tito supervised from his job site, a toolbox lined with drop cloths, stethoscope cufflink glinting on his sling. Our house. The phrase still tasted foreign sweet and sharp as summer wine. Found more dead weight? Mark grunted, prying rotted timber. Nested in the cavity, a whiskey bottle crusted with grime, its label bleached to ghost script. Old Granddad, 1958. Previous owner's ballast, he joked, but his eyes darkened. Jenny's toolbox sat nearby, holding our new keys. Odin limped across subfloor, sniffing the bottle. His pelvis healed well, though he favored his left leg in humidity. Like me in monsoon season, Mark said, rubbing the Tom's ears. His own burn scars shone pink under sweat. The emergency call shattered the afternoon. Carlos's voice crackled. Chihuahua versus elevator shaft, critical. I dropped my scraper. Mark revved his truck before I reached the curb. Paco's cafe steamed with spilled espresso and panic. Mrs. Rivera sobbed into her apron, Paco's carrier rocking at her feet. The parrot lay motionless, wings splayed, chest barely rising. Elevator closed too fast, she choked. His wing caught. I knelt on checkered tile. Compound fracture, humerus protruding through cobalt feathers, blood pooling on newsprint ads. Mark cleared tables, barking orders. Boiling water. Clean towels. His calm sliced through chaos. Or, no anesthesia. Just my trauma kit on a sticky table. Paco's beak gaped in silent agony as I aligned bone fragments. Mark cupped his body, living restraint. Talk to him, I murmured. Mrs. Rivera's trembling voice spilled stories. Paco mimicking her late husband's laugh, stealing empanadas, singing Volver off-key. Mark's thumbs pressed Paco's keelbone, stabilizing breaths. I sutured muscle silk thread, snaking through blue flesh. As espresso machines screamed. Outside, thunder growled. Rain sheeted the windows, blurring Flatbush Avenue into watercolor streaks. Final suture, bandage wrapped. Paco's eye blinked slow, drugged awareness. Alive, Mrs. whispered, kissing his head. Mark drove us home through flooded streets. Silence hummed between us, not empty, but resonant with the echo of crisis met and mastered. The brownstone welcomed us with dripping eaves and the musk of wet plaster. We stripped filthy clothes in the foyer. Rain-cooled skin pressing against exposed studs. His palm cradled my scar, my teeth grazed his burn. No words, just breath and hammering hearts and the drumroll of storm on tin roof. Later, wrapped in drop cloths, we shared warm beer. Mark turned the whiskey bottle in his hands. Jenny hid painkillers and hollowed books. Found them after. He tipped the bottle pills rattled like dead insects inside. Her emergency reserves. I touched the label's phantom text. Why keep it? To remember. He stood abruptly, carrying the bottle to the garden. Moonlight silvered the overgrown cherry tree as he dug deep, furious strokes. Glass clinked against roots as he buried it. Now I choose what stays. Rain softened to mist. We dragged the mattress to the living room, sleeping beneath gaping lath where the wall had been. Odin curled at our feet. Tito snored in the hollow of my knees. Mark's phone glowed. A realtor's update, offer accepted. He showed me the screen. Our names entwined, Chen and Russo. Partners, I whispered. His thumb brushed my lip. In crime fighting and renovation. At dawn, I woke to tapping. Mark crouched in the garden, installing a bird feeder where the bottle lay buried. Sunlight fractured through storm clouds, gilding wet wisteria. Tito patrolled newly exposed floorboards, cufflink gleaming. I joined Mark, bare feet sinking into cool mud. He handed me a sunflower seed, for Paco's cousins. As we watched, a sparrow darted, snatching the seed, wings whirring like a heartbeat given flight. July heat shimmered off the brownstone's raw brick facade, scaffolding webbing the structure like exposed sutures. Inside, the air tasted of sawdust and wet plaster. Mark wrestled an industrial sander over floorboards scarred by a century of feet, the machine's roar drowning Tito's indignant yaps. Odin supervised from a dust-free island of drop cloths, tail twitching at the invasion of progress. The emergency call sliced through the noise. Canine dystocia Chihuahua litter stuck. I grabbed my kit, sweat already pricking my neck. Mark killed the sander. Need backup? Hold the fort. I nodded at the exposed lath walls. Later's sanity. Mrs. Espinosa's apartment smelled of cumin and panic. Lola, a fawn-colored chihuahua, panted in a laundry basket lined with torn tax documents, her swollen belly contracting in futile waves. 2 pups out, Mrs. Espinosa trembled, pointing to mewling blobs in a towel. 3rd one, stuck. No imaging, just latex gloves and the sticky vinyl floor. I palpated Lola's birth canal, a tiny skull wedged sideways. Breach. Heartbeat faint but there. Warm towels. Sugar water, I ordered, reaching for lubricant. Lola's eyes rolled white, the same terror I'd seen in Jenny's watercolor hawk before flight. Outside, thunder cannoned over Crown Heights. Rain hammered the fire escape as I hooked a finger around the pup's pelvis. Gentle, gentle. Mrs. Espinosa prayed in rapid Spanish, fingers clutching rosary beads. Lola screamed, a sound like ripping silk as the pup slid free, blue and motionless. PR, tiny compressions with 2 fingers, breath puffed into rubbery lungs. 1, 2, 3, rain blurred the window into liquid darkness. On the 4th breath, the pup shuddered, a wet gasp, then wailed. Lola licked it frantically as I placed it with the others. 3 tiny bodies squirming toward warmth. Milagro, Mrs. Espinosa wept. I returned to chaos. The brownstone's living room swam in 3 inches of brown water rain, gushing through a forgotten roof hole. Mark sloshed with a shop vac, Tito paddling furious circles around his ankles. Odin watched from the stairs like a disgruntled sphinx. Pups, Mark yelled over the vac's whine. Alive. I waded in, medical bag held high. Unlike our subfloor, he gestured to warped plywood. Found the leak's source. In the attic, he pointed to a corroded vent pipe. Nestled in the gap, a time capsule 1950s newspaper wrapping a Sears catalog, a baseball glove, and a faded photo of a couple kissing on the Coney Island cyclone. Water dripped onto the woman's smiling face, eroding her features. Previous owner's ghosts, Mark muttered, mopping his brow. Or ballast, I said, rescuing the photo before ink dissolved. We camped on the dry 2nd floor landing takeout containers balanced on paint cans, thunder rattling the new windows. Mark studied the salvaged photo. Jenny hated roller coasters. David hated spontaneity. I handed him spring rolls. We honeymooned at a library conference. Rain softened to a murmur. He unrolled blueprints. Our future kitchen sketched in red ink. Vet sink here, he pointed. Mark-proof espresso machine here. His finger brushed mine. No ghosts in the specs. Later, dripping towels hung from scaffolding as we dragged ruined plywood to the curb. The storm had passed, leaving streets gleaming like obsidian. Mark paused, staring at the brownstone's reflection in a puddle Chen and Rousseau visible on the temporary mailbox. Never thought I'd root again, he admitted. I handed him a salvaged baseball from the time capsule. Swing away, sailor. He threw it high, a soaring arc over scaffolding. Odin gave chase, his heeled pelvis moving with wolfish grace as the ball plunked into murky gutter water. Tito yapped approval from my arms. Midnight found us stripping waterlogged drywall. Plaster dust snowed as Mark pried a warped section, revealing studs tattooed with generations of carpenter pencil marks. He added ours, M-Pruess S7PC. Then, below Jenny's initials, JR always forward. I traced the fresh letters. She'd hate the dust, but love the chaos. He kissed my temple, taste of soy sauce and sweat. We slept on the mattress under open rafters. Moonlight carved silver geometry through gaps where roof met sky. Mark's breath warmed my neck, his arm heavy over my scarred hip. Outside, a lone ambulance wailed, a fading heartbeat in Brooklyn's chest. The future no longer sang, it roared. August heat clamped down on Brooklyn air, thick enough to chew, asphalt softening underfoot. The clinic's AEAC groaned, losing its battle against the mercury's climb. Tito panted in his ceramic cooling vest, eyes tracking the oscillating fan while I palpated Mrs. Kowalski's bulldog's swollen belly. Heat stress, I diagnosed, feeling the sluggish pulse beneath sweaty fur. Ice packs and electrolytes. Outside, sirens wailed toward another heatstroke call. Mark texted mid-afternoon, found Jay's time capsule. A photo followed. A rusted ammo box unearthed in the brownstone's garden, lodged between cherry tree roots. Buried it years ago. Forgot. My thumb hovered over the screen. Jenny's ghost still lingered in unexpected corners. The brownstone breathed oven-hot air through its skeletal frame. Mark sat cross-legged in the dirt-streaked foyer, ammo box open on his lap. Contents fanned out, a sand dollar from Coronado Beach, dog tags etched Gerusso, a brittle sprig of lavender, and a folded watercolor, Jenny's shaky rendition of the Manhattan Bridge at dawn. Wedding week, he said, dust coating his throat. We buried dreams here. He lifted the sand dollar, its center hole framed my face. She wanted kids, I wanted stability. Odin limped over, sniffing the lavender. Mark tucked the sprig behind the cat's ear, a fragrant crown. Stupid, burying hope. I knelt, heat radiating from the unfinished floorboards. What now? He handed me the dog tags, cold, heavy. Rebury the box, or burn it? Thunder rumbled, promising no rain. The emergency shattered the stillness, overheated tour bus 40 dogs en route to shelter. We raced to the Gowanus parking lot, where panting muzzles pressed against steamed windows. Volunteers hosed crates, while Mark pried doors open with a crowbar. Chihuahuas first, I shouted, grabbing a limp Pomeranian. Its tongue hung blue, gums pale as chalk. Triage unfolded on baking asphalt. IV fluids in sliver of shade, ice packs tucked against groins, tongues coated with electrolyte gel. Mark carried Great Danes like fire victims, his shirt soaked through. A bloodhound seized, convulsions racking its frame as I threaded an airway tube down its throat. Stay with me, Duke. I pleaded, compressing its barrel chest. The heat index read 1112 Griff. When Duke's tail thumped weakly, Mark slumped against the bus tire. Jenny hated summer, he panted, handing me water. Said chemo felt like this, suffocating. Home. We hosed ash off our skin bus fire, had ignited a dumpster before collapsing in the garden. The ammo box sat between us, moon glinting off its hinges. Burn it, Mark decided. I gathered kindling dry ivy, paint scraps, Jenny's brittle lavender. The match hissed. Flames licked the watercolor first, Manhattan Bridge dissolving into embers. Sand dollar blackened, curling like a dying leaf. Dog tags glowed red-hot before buckling. Mark fed the fire with torn blueprints. New foundations need space. Heat pulsed against our faces. Odin yowled, batting a spark from his fur. Midnight. Cooler air seeped through scaffolding. We dragged the mattress to the roof, a makeshift oasis above the construction zone. Mark pointed to Jenny's garden spade plunged into fresh soil where the box had burned. Tombstone for what was. I traced his trident tattoo faded ink over scar tissue. Regrets? He pulled me against him, heartbeat steady under my ear. Only that I waited to live. Below, Brooklyn shimmered, a mosaic of fire escapes and flickering bodega signs. Tito snored between us, dreaming in the city's simmering breath. The future wasn't built on ashes. It was built on choice. September's first chill whispered through the brownstone's open windows, crisp air cutting through the ghosts of summer heat. Sawdust settled like bronze snow on newly installed floors, their honeyed maple glowing under pendant lights. Mark knelt in the kitchen doorway, chiseling the final notch for a threshold stone engraved with paw prints. Our welcome mat, he'd joked. Tito tested it immediately, nails clicking over polished granite before settling in a sunbeam with Odin. The call came as I stocked veterinary supplies in custom drawers. Injured Swan Prospect Park Lullwater. I grabbed my waterproof kit. Mark didn't ask, just pulled keys from his jeans. Detour via the hardware store. He held up a twisted hinge from the garden gate. Swan might appreciate functional wings. The swan floated like a tarnished sculpture, left wing dragging through duckweed, neck coiled in pain. Onlookers clustered at the water's edge. Fishing line, a photographer explained, zoom lens capturing the bird's struggle. Wrapped when he dove. Mark waded in, boots sinking into black muck. Steady now, Majesty, he murmured, arms outstretched. The swan hissed, beak snapping, but exhaustion won. I followed, cold water seeping through waders, trauma kit held high. Mid-lake, hip-deep, we worked. Mark cradled the swan's body against his chest, living anchor as I untangled monofilament biting into feather and flesh. Blood bloomed in the water like ink. Tendon exposed, I whispered, flushing the wound with saline. The bird's heartbeat thrummed against Mark's forearm, wild and desperate. Like that Dalmatian's paw, he said, voice tight with focus. Remember, the night David's texts glowed. I nodded, stitching. Lighting now. Back on shore, the swan rested in a dog crate. Bandaged wing, splinted with Mark's salvaged hinge. Temporary fix, I told park rangers. Needs sanctuary. Already called Queen Zoo, Mark said, toweling sludge from his arms. His seal tattoo emerged from the grime indigo trident against wet skin. We stopped at the brownstone's garden. Mark installed the repaired gate iron scrolling, now holding Jenny's spade like a heraldic emblem. I repurposed rotted timber into a recovery perch for the swan crate. Tito sniffed wood shavings, sneezing. Ballast becomes shelter, Mark observed, testing the gate's swing. Or wings, I said, watching Odin leap onto the perch. Inside, autumn light gilded unfinished walls. I found Mark at the fireplace, sitting the threshold stone. His knuckles bled fresh scrapes from the hinge. Almost done. He pressed the stone into place. Paw prints aligned with the hallway. Perfect. I cleaned his hand at the vet sink we plumbed last week. Antibiotic ointment, butterfly strips. His fingers laced through mine when I finished. Saw David today, the admission hung like frost. Twitter, Borough Hall, applying for a liquor license. His thumb rubbed my scar. Asked about you. Rain tapped sudden and sharp against the windows. What'd you say? Told him you were saving royalty. He nodded toward the garden crate. He looked smaller. Dinner was takeout sushi on drop cloths. We ate watching the swan preen its bandaged wing through French doors. Mark fed Odin sashimi scraps. Zoo transports at dawn. Will he fly? Maybe. He wiped wasabi from my chin. Or rule a pond with 3 adoring mallards. Later, sorting tools, I found Jenny's watercolor box beneath the workbench, paints dried into cracked earth in their wells. Mark crouched beside me. Buried that with her ashes. He pried open cobalt blue. Dead weight. We burned it in the fireplace, cardboard curling, pigments hissing like dying stars. Flames danced over the paw-print stone. Tito slept on my feet, a warm, trusting weight. Rain softened to mist. Mark pulled me up. Dance lesson, Doc. No music. Since when? We swayed in the construction glow, his palm on my scarred hip, my cheek against his heartbeat. Our shadows merged on subfloor, marked M pluses HDR, always forward. He hummed Volver, off-key and tender. Outside, the swan tucked its beak under bandaged feathers. At midnight, thunder growled. We lay on the mattress beneath skylights, watching lightning fork over Brooklyn. Mark traced the bridge of my nose. The hinge held. Today, I conceded. Today's all we patch. When the storm passed, silence pooled deep and clean as the lull water after rain. The swan called once, a trumpeting cry that shook dew from the cherry tree. Mark's breathing deepened into sleep. I pressed closer, Odin purring against my spine. The future needed no name, it simply was. October painted the brownstone in ochre and scarlet crisp air, carrying wood smoke and the tang of wet leaves. We stood in the gutted living room, plaster dust motes dancing in slanted light as Mark braced a support beam for the final archway. Sweat darkened his temples despite the chill. "Ready?" he grunted, sledgehammer poised. I nodded, hands pressed flat against raw brick. The crack echoed through bones as timber surrendered, opening sight lines to the garden, where cherry branches sketched calligraphy against gunmetal sky. Tito barked approval from his supervisor's crate, stethoscope cufflink gleaming. Odin wove figure eights around our ankles, tail brushing fresh mortar. Home. The word vibrated deeper now, settling beneath ribs like a second heartbeat. The emergency call shattered the calm hit-and-run pedestrian with dog. Address: 3 blocks away. Mark's truck tires screamed around corners before I buckled my kit. Chaos on Clinton Street, shattered taillight glittering like crimson ice, bystanders huddled under dripping awnings. A woman knelt in the gutter, cradling a golden retriever's head in her lap. "Milo," she sobbed, blood streaking her cashmere coat. He pushed me. Milo's hind leg bent unnaturally, ribs heaving in ragged bursts. Pulmonary contusion, I diagnosed, fingers finding weak femoral pulse. Rain slicked the asphalt as I splinted the leg with Mark's crowbar and torn scarf. "Ambulance en route for you," Mark told the woman, draping his jacket over her shoulders. "Save him," she pleaded, teeth chattering. "He's all I," sirens wailed. Paramedics swarmed her. I scooped Milo into my arms, dead weight and trust, as Mark cleared a path to his truck. "Go," he yelled over the clamor. "I'll follow." The clinic's fluorescent lights hummed like trapped wasps. Milo panted on stainless steel, gums pale as moonstone. X-rays flickered, fractured pelvis, lung bruising like storm clouds. Carlos prepped, or as I scrubbed in, "Call Mark," I ordered. "Tell him." The doors burst open. Mark strode in, soaked to the skin, carrying Milo's owner, Anya, her chart later read, wrapped in a foil emergency blanket. "Discharged herself," he said, lowering her onto a waiting room chair. "Wouldn't stay without him." Anya's gaze locked on Milo. "His birthday's tomorrow." 3 years. We worked in tandem, Mark stabilizing Anya's shock with sweet tea while I pinned Milo's pelvis. Outside, rain lashed the windows. At 2 a.m., Milo sighed into recovery, oxygen mask fogging with steady rhythm. Anya slept curled in a kennel blanket nest, tear tracks dried on her cheeks. "Like us," Mark murmured, handing me lukewarm coffee. "Stubborn survivors." Dawn gilded the brownstone's archway. Anya left with Milo's carrier and Mark's spare jacket. "Bring him Tuesday for bandage changes," I called after her. She turned, eyes luminous with exhaustion and gratitude. "He saved me," she whispered. Mark welded the final archway, joint sparks cascading like orange blossoms. I mixed mortar, the grit of sand and cement familiar as surgical scrub. When the last brick settled, he pressed my palm against the keystone. "Seal it," he said. Our handprints hardened in wet concrete side by side, fingers almost touching. That night, we christened the archway. Not with champagne, with takeout dumplings and the distant wail of fire trucks. Mark hung Jenny's spade above the hearth, its blade catching firelight. "Still useful," he declared, spearing a pork bun. I placed Milo's splint scarf in the toolbox now housing our growing relics, Jenny's watercolor ashes, Odin's first collar, the stethoscope cufflink. "Museum of Survival," I mused. Mark pulled me under the arch. Rain whispered through unfinished eaves as we swayed. No music, just the syncopated rhythm of our breaths. His lips found the hollow beneath my ear. David called today. The name no longer pierced. Oh? Asked if you'd adopt his sister's diabetic cat? A chuckle vibrated against my skin. Told him your dance card's full. Midnight. We sat on the garden benchmark forged from salvaged scaffolding. Frost silvered the cherry branches. Tito shivered in my lap until Mark tucked him inside his flannel shirt. Living hot water bottle, he grumbled, affection warming his voice. Odin emerged with a gift, a dead mouse laid at our boots. Approval rating, predatory, I laughed. Mark pointed upward. Through leafless branches, the Brooklyn Bridge glittered. Cables strung like a surgeon's meticulous stitches across the night. Fixed that once, he said. 1998. Ironworker strike. Everything's fixable? I asked, tracing his scarred knuckles. Not everything. He caught my hand. But the things that matter? His thumb brushed my ringless finger. Yeah? Frost deepened. Inside, the archway framed our mattress, a promise of shelter. As we rose, our shadows merged on the path, elongated and inseparable beneath the moon. The future wasn't built. It was chosen, daily. November winds howled down the brownstone's chimney, a hollow moan that rattled the cast-iron damper Mark installed last week. Frost feathered the French doors overlooking the garden, where skeletal cherry branches clawed at a leaden sky. I balanced atop a painter's ladder, brushing winter wheat onto crown molding while Tito supervised from a nest of drop cloths, his stethoscope cufflink catching the thin afternoon light. Below, Mark wrestled the antique stove into place, its enamel scarred but intact, salvaged from a Coney Island diner demolition. Home. The smell of turpentine and baking bread proved it. The emergency call sliced through our domestic symphony, back alley breeder raid, critical neonates. Mark's keys jangled before the address left dispatch's lips. The warehouse reeked of ammonia and despair. Crates stacked to the ceiling held shivering Pomeranians, their eyes crusted shut with infection. In a back room lit by a single bare bulb, a teenager hunched over a whelping box. Luna, her name tag read, cradling 3 motionless Chihuahua pups swaddled in a fast food uniform shirt. They won't suck, she whispered, tears cutting tracks through grime. Mom's too sick. The mother dog lay panting, ribs sharp as knife blades beneath matted fur. Mark cleared space on a stained mattress. Heat lamps. Carlos glucose gel. I palpated the mother's distended belly uterine inertia. Cold pups. Colder prognosis. We worked in brutal tandem. Mark intubated the smallest pup, breathing life into lungs smaller than almonds. I injected oxytocin into the mother's vein, kneading her flanks to jumpstart contractions. Luna rubbed the surviving pups with trembling hands, whispering, "Live, live, live," when the 4th pup slid onto the mattress. Blue, silent Luna pressed it to her cheek. "Please." Mark took it, performing compressions with 2 fingertips. 1 minute. 2, the pup gasped, a wet, ragged sound, then wailed. Luna sobbed into her sleeve. Rain drummed the corrugated roof as I spayed the mother. Mark sutured Luna's bleeding thumbnail bitten to the quick during resuscitation. "Why here?" he asked softly, swabbing iodine. "Easier than foster care," she mumbled, watching the pups root blindly. Outside, sirens wailed, animal control processing the breeder. Dusk bled into the brownstone as we arrived home, carrying 2 carriers. The mother, now Marmee, and her 4 pups in a heated crate. Mark installed them by the hearth while I scrubbed warehouse stench from my skin. His knuckles were split from dismantling cage locks or punching a wall. I didn't ask. "Luna?" I asked, toweling my hair. Group home placement. He stirred lamb stew on the salvaged stove. Jenny's recipe adapted. Told her we'd hold the pups till she's stable. We ate cross-legged before the fire, Tito and Odin circling for scraps. Flames gilded the archway's keystone, our handprints sealed in permanence. Mark ladled stew into my bowl, thyme and rosemary bloomed in the steam. "David's getting married," he said abruptly. The news landed softly, like snow against glass. "To the colleague? Different one. Kindergarten teacher." He handed me a crusty baguette. Sent an invitation. I tore bread, watching Marmee nuzzle her pups. "RSVP no?" "Already did." His boot nudged mine. "With a donation to the sanctuary in their name." Midnight. The pups squeaked like rusty hinges in their sleep. Mark stoked the fire, sparks swirling toward the chimney. I opened Jenny's toolbox. Now our reliquary, the Swiss Army knife stethoscope cufflink, Milo's splint scarf, a porcelain shard from David's grandmother's vase, deliberately shattered during his move-out. I placed Luna's bloody thumbnail bandage inside. Mark knelt, drawing a velvet pouch from his pocket. Not Jenny's rings, a new one, forged from the brass hinge that splinted the swan's wing. Ballast, he said, the word rough in the quiet. For whatever comes next. The ring glowed in firelight, imperfect, unbreakable. I slid it onto my left hand. It fit. Warm, solid, mine. At dawn, frost edged ferns across the French doors. Mark slept deeply, arm slung over my waist. I slipped downstairs. Luna waited on the stoop, cheeks raw with cold. Ran away, she confessed, breath pluming. Had to see them. We sat in the garden's brittle grass, pups tumbling over our laps. Luna cradled the runt bean against her neck. Social workers coming at 9, she whispered. Then we have now, I said, handing her a pup bottle. Sunrise gilded the cherry tree's bare branches. Inside, Mark watched from the archway, 2 mugs steaming in his hands. His gaze met mine, no words needed. The ring weighed nothing. The future felt light as a bird's hollow bone. December's first snow-dusted Brooklyn like powdered sugar, silencing the city beneath a cathedral hush. The brownstone stood finished. Honeyed floors reflecting firelight, paw-print threshold stone gleaming, and Jenny's spade hanging above the hearth like a benediction. I stood at the kitchen window, watching Mark shovel the garden path, a rhythmic scrape-scrape harmonizing with Tito's snores from his orthopedic bed. Odin supervised from the windowsill, tail flicking at falling flakes. Marmy's pups tumbled in a playpen, Bean triumphantly dragging Mark's discarded glove. Home. The word settled warm as spiced cider in my bones. The clinic occupied the renovated parlor custom cabinet stocked, surgical lamp installed, and the old stove repurposed as a sterilization station. Luna arrived at noon for bandage duty, her chipped nail polish bright against Bean's fawn fur. Caseworker approved weekend visits, she announced, rewrapping the pup's brain with meticulous care. Her thumbnail, now healed, left no trace on the gauze. Mark stomped snow from his boots, cheeks ruddy with cold. Got a housewarming gift. He placed a lumpy package on the exam table, wrapped in Prospect Park event flyers. Inside, the brass hinge from the swan's splint transformed into a wind chime. For the garden, he said. So we never forget broken wings mend. Luna hung it by the French doors. Notes like frozen raindrops rang as snow swirled. The emergency call came as we decorated the cherry tree. Luna threading popcorn garlands, Mark untangling lights. Bodega cat versus holiday tinsel obstruction. I grabbed my kit. Mark reached for his keys. Finish the star? Luna asked, holding the glittered cardboard. We found Mr. Rodriguez weeping behind his counter, Senor Gato limp in his arms. Ate the garland, he choked. Tinsel glinted in the cat's slack jaw. No, or just linoleum sticky with spilled café con leche. I lubricated forceps while Mark cradled Senor Gato's head. Easy, amigo, he murmured. The cat's pupils dilated, terror and trust. Gently, I hooked the tinsel strand, inching it from the esophagus. Rainbow plastic coiled on the floor like a shed skin. Senor Gato gasped, a raw, beautiful sound, then purred into Mr. Rodriguez's apron. Milagro, the old man whispered, echoing Mrs. Espinosa months ago. Mark swept tinsel into the trash. No more decorations? He teased. Mr. Rodriguez pressed churros into our hands. Only edible ones. Home glowed with firelight and fairy lights. Luna placed the star atop the cherry tree, its points brushing the ceiling. Jenny's toolbox, she remembered suddenly. Can I see? We gathered around the reliquary on the hearth, Swiss Army knife, snug in its leather sheath, stethoscope cufflink, pinned to Tito's sling. Milo's splint scarf folded beneath Marmy's bed. Luna's bandage wrapper, now holding dried lavender. Porcelain shard, wrapped in David's wedding invitation. Mark added Senor Gato's tinsel strand, coiled into a tiny halo. For luck, Luna traced the hinge ring on my finger. Why keep broken things? To remember, I said. Not everything shatters forever. Midnight chimed on Mark's salvaged diner clock. Luna slept in our guest room, Bean curled on her pillow. We sat beneath the tree, Odin purring in my lap, fire casting our shadows onto the pawprint stone. Snow blurred the garden into a watercolor. Mark handed me an envelope Green Mountain Wildlife Sanctuary letterhead. Final auction tally. The number stunned, enough to fund a year's surgeries. Your speech did that, he said. Our story, I corrected. He pulled a sprig of mistletoe from his pocket. Tradition demands. We kissed, slow, deep as snow hushed the world outside. His lips tasted of churros and wood smoke, and tomorrow. Dawn broke crystalline. Luna cooked huevos rancheros, while Mark shoveled the stoop. I fed Marmy's pups, their needle teeth nipping my fingers. The reliquary sat open on the counter, winter sun gilding its contents. Luna placed a folded watercolor beside it, her rendition of Señor Gato triumphant atop Mr. Rodriguez's counter. For the museum, she'd written. Mark returned, shaking snow from his hair. Caseworkers here. Luna froze, spatula hovering. Mrs. Pena entered, stamping slush from her boots. Her gaze swept the kitchen pups tumbling, reliquary gleaming, Luna's painting propped beside the toaster. Luna, she said softly. Ready? Luna hugged Bean fiercely before handing him to me. I'll be back Saturday. Bring more popcorn, Mark said. We've got a star to rehang. At the door, Luna hesitated. The toolbox, is it full? Mark closed the lid gently. Never. We watched them leave, Luna's small figure braced against the wind, Mrs. Pena's hand on her shoulder. Snow erased their footprints as they turned the corner. Mark slid his palm over mine brass ring cool against his skin. Outside, the wind chimes sang. Ice cracked from cherry branches, freeing buds that would bloom in spring. The future wasn't a destination. It was the space between breaths, fragile, resilient, and utterly ours.